This program contains content that may disturb some viewers.
Hi, Dragon.
Right.
Wow, that is so cool.
They look like innocent home videos, but they hide a darker reality.
They filmed this poor kid in horrible situations.
Police were on their trail, but it would take a massive slice of luck to save a child.
Yeah, and it's one of the needle in the haystack moments.
A global investigation of pedophilia that will stop you in your tracks. Welcome to Four Corners. Where to start? Yes, tonight's story is shocking and extremely difficult to comprehend. But stay the course, because ultimately it's about the remarkable efforts by investigators around the world to crack a highly secret code and strike a serious blow against the exploitation of the very young, the very vulnerable. Tonight we take you into the modern age of organised global child sex abuse. In particular, it's about a very secretive group of male predators and a young boy who was groomed from infancy by his two male parents in North Queensland and flown to America and Europe to be used for sex. The internet is at the heart of this story. Offenders using deeply embedded peer-to-peer or file sharing services and live streaming to exchange huge amounts of child pornography. They're often run by highly skilled IT professionals and switch internet channels frequently. Arrayed against them were two highly skilled teams of police working hemispheres apart, each struggling separately to crack the extremely sophisticated conspiracy. It was pure serendipity that brought them together. A key member of the pedophile conspiracy was an Australian man named Peter Trong, the adoptive father of the young victim. He speaks to Four Corners tonight from his Florida prison cell. The reporter is Caro Meldrum-Hanna.
In a beachside suburb north of Cairns, a little boy is playing at home.
It's a bee porter.
It's a what?
It's a bee porter on this chair going on my elbow.
We can't show you his face nor tell you his real name. He is the victim of a crime most of us can't comprehend.
And what's the beetle doing?
Beetle walking.
Yeah?
It's 2008, and the boy who we'll call Adam is around 3 years old. His father is behind the camera.
He's really tiny.
Is he really tiny?
Don't hurt yourself.
Adam's parents, Australian Peter Trong and his American partner Mark Newton, lived a charmed life in tropical Queensland.
Yeah, they portrayed themselves as the loving couple. It was almost like, I'm not sure of an equivalent, but I was going to say Brady Bunch of Cairns, but two dads, beautiful boy.
Did you make those, Pete? No, somebody else did.
They recorded almost every waking moment of their son's life.
So what else do we have?
What else do I have? I've got some tarts.
Tarts. Oh, yeah. Lovely, lovely. Oh, very nice.
Hundreds of hours of high-definition videos, thousands of photographs showing a happy family, their public face, all meticulously organised and stored. But hidden, a much bigger, private collection, chilling and criminal, documenting their sexual life with Adam.
They filmed this poor kid in horrible situations, but they also filmed him all the time doing everything else. So to him, being filmed was a very normal thing. He didn't have anybody there to protect him.
It's almost impossible to fathom that from when he was a toddler, Adam was being used for sex. Trained by his parents to believe it was normal, they began filming when he was 20 months old.
There's no way around the point that this involved acute sexual activity involving this boy. We're not talking about a kid walking on the beach. We're talking about things that no 20-month-old should be exposed to.
How would you rate the abuse and the acts that were committed on him?
How big's your scale? It's at the far end. It's at the extreme. He was subjected to acts that would put professional sex workers to shame.
By the time Adam was 4, his grooming was almost complete. Peter Trong and Mark Newton took their young son around the world to meet like-minded men. At airports, in hotel rooms, handing him over to members of a highly secretive international pedophile ring.
It was a life that was managed around airports and travel and strange men, and I would suggest systematic abuse.
Within their online community, called the Man Boy Love Network, Mark Newton and Peter Trong were superstars.
They were stars.
Rock stars in the community. Being able to move a kid around the world and have him victimized by numerous other people and still not be held accountable, that confers status.
They knew what they were doing online. They knew how to use the internet. They've been using the internet for a very long time. They knew how to protect themselves.
It worked until they got careless and some of the material ends up, we got our foot in the door.
It would take a network to beat a network. A team of investigators around the world to rescue young Adam. It was an inspector in Wellington, New Zealand, who would raise the first suspicion. It was August 2011. John Peacock of Internal Affairs had just raided the home of a suspected child sex offender, 33-year-old Craig Broadley. Police found a hard drive containing almost 100 files of child pornography and private folders full of photos, modelling shots of one boy.
These are a bit sus, aren't they? The number of them, and they've got one hell of a creepy factor to those.
Yeah. And he's just posed.
I mean, he's a very young kid.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not objectionable, but they're certainly in the sexualised posing it.
The first images we came across were of him on a hill above Wellington Airport. The images showed him posing, quite contrived poses, staring directly into camera, lying back, hand behind his head.
The photos in the collection became more intimate, provocative, but not pornographic.
My concern is whether or not the parents of this boy knew that these types of photos had been taken and what else was going on behind the camera.
So it didn't cross your mind at this stage that this boy's parents were in on it?
No, certainly not.
This way.
I'll go with you, Craig. Here we go. There's stairs up there.
Craig Broadley also had videos of an adventure exploring underground caves.
And then crawl, and bring your leg around, this leg around there, and then I'm going to just jump over. I just want to see. Yep, definite water down there.
Describe to me what's happening in those videos. What are you hearing and seeing?
Well, I'm seeing a young boy.
How old?
6 or 7. Got protective gloves on. They're walking through some pretty hardcore looking caves. It's three adults and a young boy just exploring some caves.
Where?
Well, at that point I had no idea.
Oh, good boy. Look at you, huh? Hey, up we go. Oh, look at that. Back up. One. Back towards Carpentaria.
To John Peacock, they weren't just innocent travel videos.
We'll see how we go, eh? Let's go.
There was one big clue, a Queensland number plate. Acting on a hunch, John Peacock sent a freeze frame of the image to his counterpart in Australia, Task Force Argos in Brisbane.
We got their full names and dates of births and where they were born, and we ran all of the intelligence checks on where they were from.
Did they have a criminal background?
No, we had no criminal history on either of the men.
Based on the pictures alone, for starters, they look like outdoorsy types. You know, we'd done research, we'd found that they'd done an interview with the ABC when they were trying to adopt, and then, you know, the joy and happiness they'd had in being able to adopt a child.
Putting gender on the agenda. ABC Far North.
Hi, my name's Pete, and this is Mark, and our son. We are gay dads.
Mark Newton and Peter Trong told ABC Radio in Cairns they'd had a child through a surrogate mother in Russia, and that Newton was the biological father.
We did artificial insemination with her.
And how long did that take to work?
About 2 weeks. That was pretty quick. It took just one attempt in this case to work.
But this was a lie. Mark Newton wasn't the biological father. He and Peter Trong had bought Adam for $8,000 when he was a baby, an unwanted pregnancy. Adam's birth papers were falsified. At this early stage in the investigation, Task Force Argos had no reason to doubt their story.
They appeared to be self-employed, web designers, photographers, which all married up. So on the face of things, everything appearing above board, apart from our suspicions around these photographs.
In Wellington, New Zealand, John Peacock dug deeper, this time through Craig Broadley's chat logs on Skype.
The names Mark and Peter were mentioned. There were some phrases that we used that brought into very stark highlight the nature of the activity that was going on.
There were disturbing conversations between a group of men about accessing a boy for sex. Over thousands of lines of highly explicit chat, the men discussed how Pete had a network around the world and was planning a trip to Germany with his son, Adam. Pete was swapping Adam for sex with another boy. Pete was Peter Trung. John Peacock had discovered a portal, an opening into a depraved world inhabited by Trong and a small group of hardcore pedophiles who called themselves boy lovers. Young boys were being trafficked for sex.
To have this enterprise, as you call it, extend to individuals meeting face to face across borders, transporting Adam, is something that was mind-blowing for us, baffling for us. A real shift in the way that we had normally seen this offending take place. Everything got a lot more serious. This is now child trafficking. This is now physical sexual abuse.
It was evident straight away that, you know, we didn't have another day to wait. We needed to act then. That was when we made all the enquiries we could to establish exactly where in the world they were at the time.
Peter Trong and Mark Newton had left Australia for another extended international holiday with Adam. This time, LA.
Why were they in the US? Did you have any information?
Not at that point in time, but we could only presume that they were travelling with the young boy, and my concern would be that they would be meeting up potentially with other sex offenders in the United States.
What the Australian and New Zealand police didn't know was that in the same month, but on the other side of the world, Inspector Brian Bone with the United States Postal Inspection Service, based in Washington, D.C., was about to uncover a hidden network that would eventually lead back to Newton, Trong and Adam. Brian Bone's investigation began with one man, a member of an internet relay chat group, 39-year-old Don Casper. He lived in a neat house in suburban Idaho. Inside, investigators found a hiding place.
One of our forensic analysts actually had been walking around and noted that there was a crawl space, and as freakishly as it is, just by her height, she jumped in, and out of the corner of her eyes, she found what looked like a spindle of DVDs.
So what was on the DVDs?
There were children being sexually abused.
Don Casper had secretly recorded the abuse and shared it with his online network, a super-secret internet relay chat group called Tail of the Dragon. Over 2 decades, members around the world traded millions of photos and videos depicting young boys and produced their own child pornography. Tail of the Dragon had remained hidden behind walls of sophisticated security software.
They wanted to be able to thwart law enforcement, and they kept track of what law enforcement was doing, what types of investigations we were conducting, and they were talk with other boy lovers in an effort to not get detected by law enforcement.
Tail of the Dragon was designed and built by its own members, among them IT pros, highly skilled with encryption. All had concealed their identities using multiple screen names and aliases. The first to be uncovered, A.M. Woody, was Don Casper. There was also an Australian in the group, using the alias of Red Rover. It was Peter Trong.
We found numerous chat rooms. We found information about other offenders that helped us identify where they were located.
Brian Bone began putting names and faces to aliases, picking members off one by one. He was led to Indiana, where a long-term member of Tail of the Dragon was located, the alias of Taz Blunt.
Our investigation here in Indiana started when the U.S. Postal Inspection Service came to us and said they thought that some of the members of that group might live in the Southern District of Indiana, where our office is located.
Taz Blunt acted as a librarian for the group. Indiana police dispatched a forensic team, skilled in advanced computer encryption, to his house in Anderson, an hour north of Indianapolis. His real name was Thomas Vaughan, 44 years old, unemployed, and living with his parents.
We had a specialized team that is very good at finding small pieces of computer memory. And there's an interview team that was speaking to Mr. Vaughan. Then there was a search team that was isolating what computers were inside and running.
What did he collect and what did he value?
A large amount of child pornography, separated into lots of folders, in some cases giving a clue as to who might the source be, based on the name on the folder.
Thomas Vaughan had thousands of folders. One stood out. It was called Prive Beeve. In that private folder, found on a hard drive inside a house on a suburban street here in Anderson, Indianapolis, were freeze frames,
Images taken from a video showing an adult male with a young child around 4 or 5 years old. Their faces had been cropped out. Investigators had no idea who the man was, nor the young boy. Had you seen this boy before?
No, and that's one of the alarming things, which gives it that much more of an urgency, because you know that it is a very young child.
How were you going to find him? He could have been anywhere in the world.
Well, at that point, we first had to find who we thought the offender was. We had to locate who was associated with that screen name.
What was the screen name?
The Beeve.
Explicit videos showing the Beeve with the same young boy were also found. Back in Washington, Brian Bone and his team began to scrutinise the images and analyse chat logs from Tale of the Dragon, looking for clues to identify who the Beeve was.
Were you able to find out any information about him in reference to the internet or any open source research?
He currently lives in Florida. He might be an attorney, has a connection to New Jersey. Trying to find anything else on social media and public records, but not too much yet.
Brian Bone and his team were right. The Beeve was a high-profile attorney in Florida. 38 years old, his real name, John Rex Powell.
So you had the perpetrator, but you didn't have the victim.
That's correct.
There was another man in the video, alias Sayo Bevel, or Love Boys spelt backwards, his real name Jason Beto, a 36-year-old junior tennis coach from Michigan. To find the child, the only clues Brian Bone had to go on were visual. 2 images would prove crucial. In the video, the boy had a henna tattoo on his chest and a mole on his stomach.
And at this point in time, the most important thing is to get to that new boy victim.
Yes, I mean, anytime that there's new series or new information about victims, we do want to, as quickly as possible, make sure that child is safe.
On the other side of the world, in Australia, Task Force Argos was completely unaware of Brian Bone's investigation in America. Detective Ian Wells and his team were leaving police headquarters, armed with a search warrant, to raid the Cairns home of Peter Trong and Mark Newton. They were acting on the intelligence from Wellington, New Zealand, the chat logs, the modelling photos of Adam. On a rainy Cairns morning, John Pilbin was at home with his wife Val.
In the laundry room. It started off quite unusual, actually, when the policeman walks up your front door and knocks on it and says, do you know your neighbours? I said, yeah. And then they just say to us, well, we're in there looking around, don't answer your phone, don't reply to them, don't do anything.
Val Pilbin went next door to see what was happening.
She said, oh, what's going on? Can I help? And she's advised us, well, look, they're overseas. And I said, oh, I see all the cameras. What's the go there? Well, they can access those cameras from overseas where they are, remotely.
Ian Wells and his team cut the power, disconnecting the computer servers, shutting down the surveillance cameras. A few minutes later at Val and John Pilbin's, the phone started ringing. It was Peter Trong.
He was panicking.
Oh, definitely. The panic was set in his voice when he was on the landline to me, because he was paranoid that he couldn't get to his computer, he couldn't access the internet.
Inside the house, police found several digital cameras, photo travel books, and Adam's old passport, full by the time he was 3 years old. 9 hard drives, 4 computers and multiple storage devices were seized, but almost all of them were encrypted.
It wasn't until about probably the 7 or 8 hour mark that we had our eureka moment.
Taped inside a series of American history books were negatives of child pornography. It wasn't Adam, it was a teenage boy.
And we took fingerprints and, I think it was a day or so later, it was linked back to Peter Trung.
What was?
The negatives. The fingerprints on the negatives were tied back to Peter Trung.
For Task Force Argos, it was enough evidence to act. John Rouse called on the LAPD.
Surveillance was commenced. They identified the place of residence that they were staying at.
They were staying an hour's drive from Los Angeles with Mark Newton's aunt opposite a school in Lakewood, California. Trung and Newton were handcuffed and taken away for questioning.
Look, there was basically denial. They maintained their right to remain silent, didn't answer any questions.
Police didn't find Adam in the house. He was being driven to Santa Monica Pier by a friend of Trung and Newton's. In downtown LA, police set up a roadblock. Their car was stopped and Adam was taken into care.
Apart from not presenting as a really normal child, he was, on certain questions, he withdrew completely. He would hide, he wouldn't look at the interviewer. So
what were those questions?
Just in terms of people in his life and his parents and, had anything happened to him, and, I believe one of his responses was that he didn't want to get them into trouble.
Wow, nice throw.
Using mock forensic interviews, Trung and Newton had schooled Adam to remain silent. Task Force Argos had no evidence that Adam was being abused. The police had no choice but to release Trung and Newton.
Nice.
So what did you do?
From this end, we started going very methodically through everything that we had seized. So all of the video, all of the photographs.
Inside the victim identification unit, Paul Griffiths trawled through the only hard drive that wasn't encrypted, creating a timeline of their life since 2004, a life of prolific travel in pictures, 30 countries in 6 years, meeting unidentified men.
Initially, we didn't know who any of the people they were meeting with were, really. We started to piece together information. We listened to sound on the videos. We looked at photographs. We examined locations.
In amongst the thousands of images and the hours of videos, did you find anything of the nature of child pornography, anything that would make an offence?
There was nothing illegal in any of those images that we had access to on the unencrypted drives, no.
Upstairs, digital forensic analyst Leo Wazinski was trying to crack the 6 encrypted drives. Basically what you were doing here is you were feeding lots of names, numbers, letters, passwords to try and get in.
That's right.
And you couldn't get in?
No.
You're working against the clock here because their son, Adam, he could be released back into their custody.
Absolutely.
You needed to find something.
Absolutely.
The strongest lead for Task Force Argos, Trung and Newton's most recent travel videos and photos, dated April 2011, showing Adam getting a henna tattoo at a zoo in North Carolina.
We just got back. It's been a long day. Look what I made. Isn't that lovely?
Very nice.
Hi, Dragon.
A video of an outing in San Francisco with 2 unidentified American men.
Aren't they beautiful? They're so good, aren't they?
Oh no!
No.
A few days later, Adam plays in a hotel bedroom, his father, Peter Trung, recording. His henna tattoo is fading.
Was that fun, Ruffy?
Yes, but there's terrible big waves.
Oh no, I'll have to hold on then.
Task Force Argos didn't know it at the time, But the evidence they desperately needed was staring them in the face. The dots were about to join up. Inside the Department of Justice in Washington, Inspector Brian Bone was focused on his investigation into Tail of the Dragon. He was heading to his office when he overheard a conference call about an Australian investigation led by Task Force Argos.
Yeah, and it's one of the needle in the haystack moments.
Brian Bone asked to see some photos of the boy that Task Force Argos believed was being abused. He saw the boy he'd been searching for. It was the boy in the video, being abused by Tail of the Dragon members John Rex Powell and Jason Beto. The boy with the mole on his stomach and the henna tattoo on his chest. What matched them up?
I think the dead set immediate giveaway was the tattoo. There's a henna tattoo, very, very particular. You put it all together, it's definitely our boy. Jubilation, relief, look, every human emotion you can possibly describe happened amongst this entire team because that was it. Case closed.
In February 2012, Mark Newton and Peter Trung were arrested and brought to Indiana to be prosecuted. They both pled guilty and awaited sentencing. Separated from his partner and cut off from his network, Peter Trung started talking.
He explained a lot of the circumstances. He was actually able to... we had the canvas, we had the frame, and he was actually able to paint a lot of this stuff that we might not have ever known as to exactly what had occurred.
Faced with a possible life sentence, Peter Trung made a stunning decision. He handed over the passwords to all of the encrypted drives, allowing forensic investigators into their highly secret world, helping police track down more offenders and their victims. Inside, investigators discovered just how big the network was, bigger than they ever thought.
Have you seen anything like this before?
Not in such a volume in terms of this kind of material, I would say, no.
Their obsession was young boys, and their collection spanned 2 decades. Adam was their star.
There's one there, very private.
Which is where we find the photographs of Adam. There's images from around the world, yeah.
And from how old is he?
Certainly younger than 2 years old.
In Indianapolis, Assistant US Attorney Steve DeBrota went through all the evidence.
We're talking about sexual intercourse, oral, anal sexual intercourse, from about age 20 months forward to when the victimization stopped.
He watched more than 80 hours of Adam being abused. In 1 month alone, when Adam was 5 years old, Newton filmed himself having sex with his son on more than 12 different occasions. Adam was also filmed with multiple men around the world.
In one case, we found Mr. Newton's voice instructing someone in the room with Adam not to be disrespectful to the person in the room at a period of time when that adult is molesting Adam. And
how was Adam being disrespectful?
Adam, you could tell from the video, wasn't interested in doing the sexual activity in question. He wanted to just play.
So far, 8 men have been identified abusing Adam, all organised by Trung and Newton, whose travel expenses were often paid for by the men who exploited their son.
What would be the deal that Peter Trung and Mark Newton would strike?
It's actually kind of pathetic. They're really not getting paid. There's no financial motive here. Adam will be involved in sexual activity with men, not for money, but to just do it. Probably for the rationalization of it, for the status of it, for the fantasy of it, all of that.
In December 2013, Peter Trung was sentenced to 30 years in prison. In court, he said he was sorry.
It's for others to judge whether you want to accept whether he's sorry that he did that stuff, or he's sorry that he got caught.
Do you accept it?
I think he's sorry he got caught.
Peter Trong is serving his 30-year sentence here at the Mariana Correction Centre northwest of Florida. He arrived a few days ago. He agreed to a television interview inside the centre, but overnight the warden denied us access. We've been told that Peter Trong is already a target here. His crimes have given him celebrity status. Some inmates have asked to share his cell, others want to harm him. There is a lot we want to ask Peter Trong. Why did he commit the crimes he did, and what is he really sorry for?
What about the medication? Is your medication coming in?
Defence attorney Angeline Gates is speaking to her client, Peter Trong. He calls her from prison almost every day. She says Peter Trong has undergone a massive transformation.
He's completely on the scale of it's wrong. All of it.
That's a huge 180.
That's correct. Hence the reason why he's gone through so much psychological trauma and suicide attempts.
Psychologist Robert Hallen was the first doctor to assess Peter Trong in prison.
He was in tremendous distress. I mean, I don't think he stopped shaking the entire time, and he was like a child, just completely overwhelmed, scared out of his mind, worried about his son.
Peter Trong has given permission for Dr. Hallen to talk to Four Corners about his case.
The sense I got from everything he said was that essentially he had a very lonely childhood.
Peter Trong and his family were Vietnamese refugees. They arrived in Australia when he was 2 years old. Trong told Dr. Hallen he was molested by a relative from the age of 9.
The way he describes it, it was a profoundly important one. He loves that person. That person gave him something he never got any other place. No, I'm not talking about the sex, but just an adult that he felt he could depend on, an adult that cared about him.
Peter's parents had another child, a son, and when Peter was 14, they bought him a computer.
At that point in time, he started to show homosexual tendencies. So he would go to school, and then he would come home, and he would get on the internet with his new peers and be very comfortable and be very normal in that world.
He started searching for validation. He started searching for answers to the questions that were increasing in his mind about himself and his sexuality.
Online, Peter Trong found the Man-Boy Love Network.
Well, they gradually got around to talking about how society doesn't understand children, because Peter was a child, remember, in these relationships with these men. And they remember that their goal is to eventually be able to use Peter as a sex object.
Would this be a grooming process?
Grooming par excellence. They're finely tuned at it, highly skilled.
When Peter Trong was 18, he left Australia to live in America and began a relationship with a man he met online. Robert Reve was in his 50s.
We call him the mentor. This gentleman was encouraging and trying to indoctrinate him into the concept that now that he's an adult, he's switching from the boy part of the man-boy love to the man part of the man-boy love.
Reve encouraged Peter Trong to start a relationship with a friend of his, another member of the Man-Boy Love Network, Mark Newton. They travelled the world together, visiting orphanages, photographing themselves with boys. They decided to have a child of their own.
Did Peter's mentor also encourage Peter to become a father?
Very much so, yes. He thought that Peter could be a good parent. He thought it would be a good idea. And Basically everybody in the man-boy love group, from my understanding, thought that it would be a good idea.
When Peter Trung was 28, he became a father.
As the baby they adopted grew a little, then Mark began to mention that it would be a good thing for the child now to introduce him that with a little touching and things like that.
Peter Trung said Mark Newton and Robert Reve, pictured here with Adam, convinced him that having sex with his son and allowing other men to do the same was okay. Based on the conversations he had with Peter Trung, Dr. Hallen believes he isn't a pedophile.
If Peter Trung isn't a pedophile, what is he and who is he attracted to? Because he engaged sexually with a child.
From what I understand about Peter, his sexual gratification comes from being with older men, good-looking men, strong men who take charge. And I really don't have a sense that on his own he would ever be interested in a child sexually.
And he explains his sexual interaction with children as?
Make the children happy, like Mark said, and because Mark liked it.
Before we left Mariana, Florida, where Peter Trung is serving his sentence, we got a chance to speak with him from a nearby hotel. His attorney, Angeline Gates, was also on the phone.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Peter. Peter Trung told us that he too is a victim, indoctrinated by members of the Man Boy Love Network when he was 16.
Their philosophy was that children are sexual beings and that it's not wrong for adult men to have sex with and to have relationships with young boys.
And did you accept that? Did you agree?
I did. They were very convincing, to be honest with you. You know, they pointed me to different psychological studies, different books, different articles, and they even pointed me to history. You know, I said, "Oh, this happened in history. It's the right thing. It's not bad. It's what they want. It's good for them." And this was drummed into my head. And eventually, they had me go out and start helping them find victims and find certain types of material, such as child pornography, to satisfy them. And that's why
he said he was sorry.
I'm locked up with a lot of predators here who have gone out and raped and done a lot of very bad things to children, and that's just not me. You know, I'm not a predator. I'm not a deviant person by nature as such.
Peter, you say you're not a deviant, but we understand that you began to commit sexual acts with your son when he was very young, and
no, we can't go into that. We're not going into that.
Can I ask you then, Peter, about how that happened with your partner?
No, we're not going into that either.
Do you want to say anything? Because you've said you're sorry. Do you want to explain how that happened, if you were led to that?
No, Angela, this is making me really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I know that. That's why we're not doing it. We're not going there.
They're coming out. They're really. It sounds like they're just trying to plaster me as a monster, and I don't want this.
That's fine. Okay, so that's fine. You can hang up. And
I'm going to hang up. I'm going to go.
Okay.
Over. We didn't speak to Peter Trung again. He will remain behind bars. His future has been determined. But what of his son Adam, who's now 9 years old and in the care of relatives? This is one of the last videos recorded with his parents, Easter morning in America.
It's the bestest day ever. Need to have a whole bunch of toys.
He'll have the longest journey ahead of him.
Absolutely. Look, my understanding is he's being inundated with support and help. I don't know. We're dealing with someone who's really scarred. We're dealing with behaviour and traits and personality that was written into his DNA from birth, and to shake that, I think it's going to be a long, hard battle.
Peter Trong's partner Mark Newton was sentenced to 40 years jail elsewhere in the United States for his part in the conspiracy. As a footnote to tonight's story, it's worth observing that it does not reflect on gay parenting, but on the actions of two individuals. It's also worth remembering that most child sex offences relate to crimes against young girls, not young boys, and the predator is usually known to the family. Next week on Four Corners, scrutiny on the intelligence operation that has Australia and East Timor squaring off over the billion-dollar gas reserves in the Timor Sea. Until then, good night.